We'll call to order the City Commission meeting. It is Monday, August the 28th. It's 5:30 p.m. Would you please rise for the invocation and the pledge? Heavenly Father, we ask that you watch over this group tonight. We ask that you give us the wisdom to make good decisions for the city of Leesburg. We do this in your name. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Proclamations tonight, we have none. Presentations, we have our special events. And I'll turn it over to Al for that.
All right, let me go to the podium. So, formality purposes. Anna's going to put it up. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, awesome. Okay, Anna, next slide. The purpose of this item is for the City Commission to consider whether or not the city should take over events. There's been a lot of talk about events the past, 45, 30 days. And so I think it's important to kind of revisit history for a broader understanding. Mayor Burry, you asked me to make a little bit of a presentation under your matters at the end of the meeting, at the last meeting where this was at. And so essentially, I think we need to revisit some history, why are we where we're at, and how do we go forth? And the question is how does the City of Leesburg organization, you all, want to promulgate events, and is having events an important aspect of the quality of life of Leesburg? I think the typical answer to that is yes. The City of Leesburg organization wants to ensure that we have quality events that make Leesburg a great place to live, work, and play. We need to compete with competing communities, and events are something that people and business measure your community by, so they're obviously a fabric of our environment. Leesburg has been special for a number of reasons on how we've promulgated events. And for a long, long time, I'm going to use names and be direct. No disrespect, not good, bad, or indifferent, but just trying to be factual in where we're at, why we're at today. Long ago, we joined forces with the Leesburg Partnership. Leesburg Partnership, I don't know, was formed in the late 80s, early 90s. What was the answer, Mandy? 28 years ago. So mid-90s, that the Leesburg Partnership was formed. It formed for probably different reasons, but ultimately that organization, from my perspective, turned into kind of a lobbying branch and a Main Street organization that promulgated the benefits of downtown, but then it also became an events arm for the city. And the philosophy became, if we partner with the partnership by helping support the Bike Fest and Mardi Gras, that enough revenue would be generated that other secondary type events would be conducted. And instead of the city having that expense and the staff to do these events, the partnership would do that, and that money was generated from the Bike Fest and Mardi Gras, kind of the big name events for the city that the partnership did for many years. And the revenues from that went to other not-for-profit organizations, Lions, Rotaries, and the groups that helped them during the big events in their volunteer efforts, and then the residual monies of those went to go fund other special events like Beast Feast, 4th of July, Christmas Stroll, Beer Craft. Now, some of those are ticket events, and I'll get into the difference, but for years, the city saw value in that partnership, and that partnership saved the city money in having to be the producer of events. So down to the third bullet point there. So that formula worked for a number of years, but for a bunch of different reasons, that engine does not work anymore. I think, in short, if we're going to put bullet points on it, it's a product of its own success. Varying folks who now come to Bike Fest, and essentially a decline in those profits, that there is not the seed money after Bike Fest is done these days. birthdays to be able to support special events. And unfortunately, based on the performance, not that there was a bad event or anything like that, but based on the performance of the last Bike Fest, where revenues were $30,000, $40,000 net, that's not enough to even sustain the partnership in out years, maybe a few more years, less a big one, if something turns around. COVID had an impact, so there's a number of things that have impacted this event, but I think there's still the want of the business community and this organization to have special events. When that realization came, I guess about a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, the partnership board addressed this body and they asked for funding, $450,000. This body did not really, next slide. This body did not really say yes or no, but I think it's fair to say that this body warmly intimated that we would consider funding the partnership. The partnership then, I think, took that as a positive thing, went back and talked to some of their folks, and at the end of the day, they decided maybe at this stage it's not the best avenue for the partnership to do events anymore, and subsequent to your all's preliminary consideration of $450,000, the partnership came back to me on a staff level and said, what would it look like if the city took over events? So that went out in the community. Mayor Burry, you asked me to give the update. I gave you a quick one, so now this is the details. So what would that look like? What would it look like if the city was the manager of events? How would we get that done? So first, what do other communities do? So we looked at 3 major communities in our region, kind of our big competitors, if you will, and what did they do? We looked at Claremont, we looked at Tavares, we looked at Mount Dora. So how much do they spend? What kind of staffing levels do they have? So simple answers. Claremont spends $372,500 on special events. I'm going to come back to Tavares. Mount Dora spends $410,000, almost $411,000 annually on events. The city of Leesburg technically right now spends $38,400 on events with the partnership with the civic funding derivative, which not even in general fund impact. The city of Tavares, I think, is the interesting one because this is the model that I would say if we take this over, we copy. The city of Tavares spends about $451,000 on special events. Mind you, these numbers do not include staff, and they do it through 2 different ways. First, they have what they call economic development events, which are kind of their big name events. They're the Plains, Trains, and Barbecue Festival that they do on an annual basis, their Rocktoberfest, and the Rhythm on Ruby. Those are kind of the marquee events at Tavares. They fund those events out of their downtown Tavares CRA. So that's important. Then they have, kind of like us, they have some underlying events. They spend those out of their general fund. That's a mechanism that I think we want to look at because based on the location of our CRAs, based on the request, I think those residual monies in the CRA is how this organization, how the city of Leesburg would then fund events. We would fund it by using CRA monies and host the events in the district. That's part of the CRA plan. It's tested. It's a tested expense of your CRA monies or your TIF monies, your tax increment finance monies. So that's a model that's already out there. We know it works. We know it's reasonable. Next slide. So if we were going to create a special events force, bottom line is we're going to need more people. And the special answer that we think to that is about 2.5 people. So the way the organizational chart would look like is, of course, city commission, the city manager. Under the city manager is the recreation department that's led by Travis Rima. So I would suggest that the special events arm of the city be a division of the recreation department. We would need 2 people. We would need the special events manager. The special events manager would, I'm gonna let that, sorry. The special events manager would be the kind of the general manager of conducting the special events. They would be charged with bringing us concepts. They would be charged with administering the events, managing the events. Sure, they get lots of support from Travis and myself, but that manager will also need an assistant, which we call the special events coordinator, and some part-time help. I put an events committee in there because I think that this is going to be an important aspect of the city. Special events, I think it will be looked at, I think both pro and con. I think there's lots of different opinions on how we get into it. So having a special committee may or may not be an avenue that you would want to consider. The pro side of having a committee is I think it presses some checks and balances. For years, we've operated under an events arm of the community that's quasi-associated with us, but not completely associated with us. So pros and good events and bad events, the city doesn't take the heat. You know, it's an easy buck to pass. I think an events committee then may be necessary to bring on some of the folks to give input on what events we want. Moving forward and in the next couple slides, not yet, Anna. Almost there. Moving forward, there's going to be a lot of unanswered questions in the immediate future. I don't think that should determine whether we do this or we don't do this, because at the end of the day, I think we have the wherewithal to get this done. But it's a matter of getting the right personnel in place, bringing those folks on board, and then getting everything started. So I don't think we have a technical problem, but we haven't done this, so there's not a lot of answers, or there's going to be a lot of questions. So maybe we want an events committee that says, hey, we're going to do these events and work as a sounding board through me and Travis to the special events coordinator. Or maybe we don't want that at all, and we remind everybody, if we fail at this was put on our desk, and we manage it moving forward. So that's to be thought about. But that's the overall structure of how additional people, events committee working under Travis, and how it's funded by the CRA, how it works into the organization. Next slide. What would special events be? And I think we break down special events into three primary things. First is we have 3 or 4 major events to be conducted in the CRA district. So the CRA district is essentially that box from Canal Street to 9th Street, Meadow to Magnolia, and that includes Venetian Gardens. That's the downtown CRA, roughly. I left out all the way to John. I left out all the so it's actually Newell Hill Point, follow 441 and Dixie around to 9th Street, and then add in Venetian Gardens. Okay, that's the downtown box. So 3 major events in that box. I don't have the answers for you on what those events would be. I think from the folks I've talked to, we want at least 2 major events, and that is to dress up and really blow out the fireworks with different events and activities and different things where the city would absorb the costs and everybody gets to go to these, and these are no-pay major events. And we sponsor all the trinkets and gadgets, the fireworks, the slides, the whatever we put in that event, that's absorbed by the city, and maybe a few minor sponsors. The second big event that I think everybody wants to continue to keep is our holiday season, where we have the Christmas stroll, the parade, the Christmas house, the light up night, all those things. So maybe we want to expand that major event so that it's a couple weeks long or a couple of weekends. But again, those are all these activities and events that happen around the holiday seasons that we want to bolster and beef up and make Leesburg special. Put us on the map for, man, we got a great 4th of July, man, we got a great holidays. The next comes some of the questions. Do we want to continue Bike Fest? The answer to that unilaterally may be yes, or it may be no. If it's no, then do we want to replace it with something? I think the feedback that I've received, that you've probably received, that is if Bike Fest goes away, then another major event needs to come in place. What that event is, I don't know. What that event needs to be determined by in the future is the person that we bring in as the events coordinator is going to need to help us lead that and give us some concepts, and the person we select is going to need to have some experience with that. We'll get into that in a little bit as well. So maybe Bike Fest is a continuation of Bike Fest in some form or another, is one of our major events. Maybe it's the creation of a new event, or maybe we come up with something different. Maybe we go back, we both start at Mardi Gras. So that's where I think creativity is really the sky is the limit, and it's really whatever we determine, or as a group that we decide, whether it's from you or the events committee, or whether you say, Mentor, go figure it out with your staff and you charge us with that. Either one of those three options is fine with me. But I think we want 3 to 4 major events like that. The next is kind of continuation of recreational events. And lately we've kind of started redefining those events. So we have a family event type of section where we continue to do stuff like the Bounce-A-Palooza, I can't say daddy-daughter to save my life, the daddy-daughter dance. We have the breakfast with Santa. We have the brunch bunny. We have conservative nature walks. We have fishing. We have kayaking stuff. We have hiking stuff. And then we're also now moving into some sports marketing stuff that we've been doing more. If you all got the email, the TDC just voted to give us an additional $3 million in funding. There's some stages to go on before that becomes official, but very excited. Commissioner Reisman serves now for us on the TDC, so that's a very exciting proposition that hopefully the BOCC will give us some additional funding, which will help with the Susan Street project and the Sleepy project to have the rectangle fields concepts and the diamond field concepts. So, and Allison, through our association with ASA, Allison Strange and Associates, has really worked well to start looking at different events, bolstering and securing our agreements with the NCAA, and so those type of events we do already. We need to continue to do. New ideas might come. We've talked about the concerts at Pat Thomas. We've talked about different concerts on Ski Beach. Maybe we go back to the movie night. Maybe we go back to markets. So those are other type of things that we want to do. We also want to help other organizations with some of the other festivals that we do, like the Heritage Festival, the Juneteenth Festival, Martin Luther King Parade, the Back to School Bash. So there's a number of other events that we don't want to lose. Then there's this third layer of events that I'm going to call ticketed events. These events are popular events. The immersive event that the Chamber does, Beast Feast, Art Festival, Chili Cook-Off. I don't know if the Heritage Festival is a ticketed event per se. It's not, so I got it in the wrong category. But there's certain ticketed events that I think some of the not-for-profits will want to continue to do because they're good fundraisers for them. So we have a level of ticketed events that help those not-for-profits like the Chamber, the Downtown Business Association, maybe the CDC or what have you. So at the end of the day, though, those are kind of the three events. And what I think we want to do, next slide, is how do we fund it? I think that this is the numbers. Frankly, I'll be honest. I don't know what those numbers are because we haven't dealt with this on a basis. Once upon a time, we put together a chart that did some of those tertiary events that the partnership did. Ultimately, we didn't move that direction. Now we're kind of here. But so the number that we think we need to start at is 450. That number kind of matches some of our neighbors, and it breaks down into about $200,000 for personnel. I think that the special events manager is going to be the critical piece. That's the position where I think we need to bring it up in the pay scale and make it about a 136. That gives us the ability to recruit somebody from about 70,000 to 100,000. That sounds like a big salary, but I think in this regard, we need a big salary somebody in that position because we need somebody with events background, with somebody who's got experience, whether they're somebody who was locally or whether there's somebody we do a recruitment for this and bring in some out-of-town folks. I think you want to find the right person who knows how to do events. They have a background in this, and they help us with new concepts and fresh ideas. So then you need that support network underneath them, and so I think that there's where the outlay of about 200 is. That leaves about 250 in the CRA for operation issues that as it comes up, whether that's funding bounce houses and slides or what have you, and maybe on these major events, maybe we have an outskirt of this where we create an internal special organization where we have to issue short-term debt and new revenues come in from different things that help offset that. My hope is that in the future, that 450 will be offsetted by revenues that come in from major events. Don't know what that number is, so I don't want to advise how we do that. I think in out years we'll do that. Until we figure out what revenues can be brought in by major events, then that subsidy, the $450,000 subsidy from the CRA, is going to curtail capital improvements in that district until A, revenues from the general fund, DST, or gas transfers come to fruition, or revenues start offsetting that expense, which then allows that CRA money to be spent back on capital improvements. So there is a little trade-off there. I think it's this body's determination to make whether you want to make that trade-off. I would suggest to you in a 50-50 capacity that making that trade-off is a reasonable one, because I think in out years we'll see revenue growth in general fund or other avenues that will come back to the CRA, or hopefully we'll do the events right, and those might be able to be self-sustaining or reduce the number of the amount of revenues that we need. Next slide. This is kind of a conglomerate of our existing policies, because ultimately I think where we want to go is that if special events is roosted in the events division of the Recreation Department, the city moving forward will want to manage what events occur on city properties. We do that now to an extent, but we pretty much have a free-for-all. You know, if you want to do an event and you go through a process that we have in the code where you pay a fee, it goes through the Development Review Committee, and they stamp your event. You see this come across your desk in the past in the major events, like when the partnership asks for the, you give them the special caveats for the district. So you see this come across your desk on major events, 500 people or above. And that's lined out in this process. What I think where we need to go that is if events come to the city, we need to better manage that. And so on an annual basis, as we review this in the budget process, we say these are the events we're going to do. The city's going to do these events. The not-for-profits are going to do these events. And we're going to have these tertiary events. And if you're not in that list from the get-go, then you don't get an event. I think that's important because I think part of the problem that we're seeing now is we're having multiple events that kind of tax our infrastructure, tax our staff, and maybe not the quality that we want to see. So in this case, on these proposed changes and overviews, this part of code, that kind of, you need to blow that up and put the new process in, which is the city commission will determine what events we do. And then maybe it's a review by staff as we have the events coordination in place. Moving forward, I think this comes in steps. Tonight, I was looking for the city commission to give me direction. I think your direction, it can be, stick this in the budget, and we'll make a formal vote on it in September. You have your meetings on the 14th and I believe the 28th when you formally adopt the budget on first and second reading, and you can say yay or nay. Then you can say tonight, yep, let's do it. That would probably save some time. Or you can say this evening or in September, you can say, nope, King's X, we're not doing it. Partnership here is 450, or nope, we're not giving you any money at all. So I think you have a bunch of different options. My suggestion would be one way or another that you fund the partnership, or that we take this in-house. In taking it in-house, I think there's a couple of more steps that we need to do. I think immediately we would need to advertise. Well, A, you say yay or nay. B, get it in the budget. If this evening, if you say yay, then you move step 3 up to step 2, or it'd be step 4, which is start the recruitment process for the events the events manager, that lead person on that position. That would actually allow us to probably get something out just after Labor Day and in the marketplace to start recruiting. Take about 30 days off, because if you say you want to wait till you approve it in the budget and then you approve it in the budget, then we won't get that out until October. Then I think the next kind of steps is we introduced this to the public. I had a couple of conversations with the partnership exec board about how that would look. The partnership dinner was canceled for this year, but perhaps towards the end of October, first part of November, maybe we rekindle the partnership annual dinner, and we kind of have that's where we're passing the football, so to speak. We talk about this is how we did it, this is how we see it in the future. And then there's a couple of partnership events that the partnership expressed that they want to continue. So I think we continue with those with staff assistance in the interim, and then hopefully then by the new year we're off and running with the organizational structure changed, it funded, with determinations then on what type of events we want to do. I will leave it there, and I know that probably there's a bunch of questions, but that's kind of the overview, as if the city takes on events, this is how I would propose to this body how events are managed.
Does anyone have questions for Al while you're there? Or?
I have several.
Go ahead.
How many events are you saying this new department would be involved in now?
3 to 4.
I think that the events need to be broken down into major events and to secondary events. There's no limit on the secondary. I think what the limit needs to be is we need to find that happy medium of what quality events are. And how much can we perform? How many events can we have that are good quality, that represent Leesburg well? And if that number is less, then it's less. If that number is more, it's more. And so I think there's kind of going to be some ibs and yangs to determine what the best events are. Immediately, I think the answer is going to be we want 2 to 3 major events, maybe 4, until we determine out where we want our niche to be. And the major events, that's the Bike Fest event, the 4th of July event, big holiday events that are open to the public, that may have some revenue generators embedded in them, with vendors, signups, with alcohol sales, kind of mimic the engine a little bit of what the partnership did. The difference in this case is that we don't have to have these events generate significant monies. We just need to break even, and maybe we have a smaller subsidy, or we get the balance on subsidies. So making money is not the ultimate goal. Breaking even and having quality events, or maybe a small subsidy, is the ultimate goal. Then I think we need to continue those secondary events. How many of those there are, I think it's what's well received by the community, how those events get pulled off, and how well Travis and the new coordinator manage different events, the daddy-daughter stuff, the Easter Bunny stuff, all that kind of stuff. So a number of events, I don't have that answer, but those are the setups that we want to do, and then still have the ticketed events for the not-for-profits. All in all, sounds like probably like a round number of major and minor events is somewhere around 12.
Okay. And the city's revenue source to recoup some of the money is going to be off the vendors?
I think the city's revenue source to recoup revenues would be how that major event is set up, what it looks like. Vendors, alcohol sales, those sponsors, those type of things. So until we have a feel for what that event's going to be, I can't say what the revenue source is going to be. If it's going to be like we're going to recreate Bike Fest and the city's going to manage it, then I would say that the source of revenue that comes in to the partnership would now then come into the city. So alcohol sales, vendor sales, those type of things, those would be a city revenue that would offset the contribution from the CRA.
Okay, so as far as alcohol sales go, I believe the partnership had their beer and wine license that everybody operated underneath that umbrella. So what do we do? Well, how would you contend with that? Because I don't think the city
that's a
alcohol license.
That's a grant question, but the city is just then becomes the umbrella or an associated agency that we may create that's not the city but run by the city becomes the umbrella. Does that increase liability? Yes. Is that something ultimately we should worry about? I'm going to say no, because liability is what we deal with. I don't think us running the event versus the partnership or some non-profit ever has taken us out of the liability equation, because the city of Leesburg is associated with all these major events. So I don't think I can sit here and say our liability doesn't increase, but I'm going to say I wouldn't make your decision based on, oh my gosh, this is an increased liability for the city.
Sure, no, and I'm not overly concerned with liability. I'm just asking, if we were to take this over, so the city is going to create an entity, a nonprofit entity, to get an alcohol license for
I
all these
don't want to be,
operate?
you're asking me a yes or no. So I don't want to answer definitively, because I think there's lots of different concepts. So this evening is really concept mode. And to make our decision, I don't think we're going to be able to get definitive answers to this. It's going to be, we've got experienced folks from the partnership who we'll work with, who bridge us the gap, but it's going to take some experience. But I don't think it's anything between myself, Travis, the people that we work with at the partnership, and just our good old know how to get things done, getting it done. Again, I don't know if that's a comforting answer or not. It's an honest answer, but we'll get through it, and we'll figure out how to make it work.
I think the partnership, and I see some partnership board members here, but I believe they bought insurance, to protect themselves from liability on these events.
Yes.
Okay.
One point I just want to bring up before we get too deep in it is we do have a consensus of the commissioners that we want to take over these events. We're kind of making some assumptions, and I haven't heard really anybody say no or yes, and I'd kind of like that before we go too far, into.
Yeah.
I like.
Go ahead.
I like to go with to support the change of how events are planned and managed. But I also would like to be clear before we are to vote or decide or make any further decisions, and understand and agree that the expectations of the staff planning or whoever the event group will be planning, that we'll be mindful in creating new events to obtain input from the community, especially the CRA, that box, I guess you would say, and work diligently to create events that will be capture all of cities to celebrate cultural diversity in all of Leesburg, i.e., meaningful, educational, as well as entertaining and all-inclusive. That would be my first thing I'd like to put on record, for these new events that we add to.
And you just gave me a great lead into my only question. The issue is I'm not sure why this falls entirely on the downtown CRA. I mean, my reaction is maybe half, but this is a citywide, these are citywide events that not only all Leesburg residents benefit from, but even people outside the city. And we're taking all this money away from the CRA. I'd like to at least cut it in half, and that would keep more money in the CRA to continue to improve our downtown. That's the only question I have. I fully support it. I'm just scratching my head on why the downtown CRA would fund 100% of this. We're doing events for Carver Heights. We're doing events in Pine Street. We're doing events all over town.
That's a wide open question, but let me throw this at you. There's a number of layers to that question. Why the downtown CRA? The first answer is because that's where the easy money is. And most of the major events are in the CRA district. So it becomes an easy revenue source that doesn't have an impact. The next source is the general fund. Right now, this general fund pays $25,000 for the fireworks. ultimately, I think as this materializes, you will see less of an impact on the CRA and more of a diversity of funding sources for the events. I don't have that answer tonight, but I think where we need to head is if we're taking over events, we do worst case scenario, which is this makes it work, this gets it started, and we'll figure it out as we get into fiscal year 25 and get some experience under our belt, where hopefully then we can have a source of revenues, a source of general fund monies, and a source of CRA monies that make the wheel turn. I don't think that happens year one.
And that's fair. I will support this. I've said it repeatedly. The events, I missed them during COVID. They do create quality of life. Let's see. And I'd like to approve it tonight. I am going to miss the September 28th meeting. I think time is of the essence. I don't want to risk this one not being approved on the 28th within my absence.
I also am in favor of this. I would like to vote tonight as well. I would like all the events, especially for the Leesburg residents. If you have a family of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 kids and you come to these events, $2 here for everything, $5 here, it can get taxing on the families. So I would like for Leesburg residents to come and enjoy our events and not have to pay for anything for those events.
Well, I would say I'm not opposed to the city having their special events. I think we should, but to appropriate, you might as well say $500,000 to a brand new department that we don't even really have a good template on how it's going to work or what they're even going to do. I think it's a little premature until we have a better idea of a lot of different questions versus, appropriating this kind of money. And we'll figure it out as we go. No.
Okay, I respectfully disagree with that.
I think we're going to mimic something like what the partnership already does, but just on the city level.
I know, but that's been a failed model.
We could spend months analyzing this. We just got to get in the trenches and give it a try. It may not work, and we may end up hiring a company to do it. I mean, who knows? But we need to keep the events going in some form or fashion. Yeah. If we don't fund this, the events go away, and that's not good for our residents.
Yeah, and I think in order to, it's obvious that we have 3 supporters. Yeah. I am in favor of having events in the city of Leesburg. I look at the money. We're talking about $38,000, and the partnership was doing all the events, and now we want to put $450,000 in it. I would dare say that the partnership made their money on alcohol sales, is where that revenue comes from. So certainly if we are going to take over those events in order to offset our taxpayer dollars that are going into it, I would look for us to try to make some money at these events to decrease those costs.
Well,
so I think that's important.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Jimmy. I mean, that's my point. I'm not against the events.
Right.
I think they're great for the city, but I think we ought to have a better plan before we appropriate $500,000 going in, and we'll figure it out as we go. It's to me, it's not great business finance to operate that way.
All of our surrounding cities do this model, so I think we can mimic or get some input from them as well.
So, at this point, I think what we need to do is just have a consensus vote. Those that would support moving forward with this plan, and let Al get into the specifics. Would that be appropriate, Grant, to get the commissioners?
Yes, sir. I think that would be. I think that Mr. Minner was really looking for direction on sort of how to get this thing started here and bring back additional information to the commission, sort of in terms of specifics, to kind of iron that down as it moves forward.
Can we direct Al to go ahead and put the...
Why don't you do the consensus vote?
Okay.
And then after that,
I'll make a motion to approve the 450, because I'm afraid with my absence on the 28th, this is going to get voted down, or is at risk. And I think this is important. I will make a motion to go ahead and fund the 450 for the next fiscal year, to support Al's recommendation. And by the way, I compliment Al. I mean, Al's spent a lot of time on this. And I respect Commissioner Cannell's comments. I mean, but we just got to give it a try. If the other 3 cities can do it, I'm confident we can pull it off. But I've made a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor with a second. Any discussion?
Like you said, I mean, without some type of plan moving forward, I mean, I can't go along with it. I mean, I just think we're getting the cart before in front of the horse here. I mean, I think we should have a plan, as Commissioner Reisman said. I mean, we can model the other cities, but let's have that model. I'd like to see what they do before we approve $500,000 of taxpayer money, and we learn on the fly, on the job, if you will, of what we're even doing.
Any other discussion?
Do we need more public comment?
No. Roll call?
Commissioner Connell,
No.
Commissioner Reisman,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Berry,
Yes.
Mayor Burry.
Yes.
So just as expectation of moving forward, where we're at is this will be, based on your vote, the two immediate things that will occur, well, three, is I'll get back with the partnership and start kind of setting up a transition on how we move from the one to the other. There will be an advertisement out to start recruiting for the event coordinator position. And then the numbers that you saw on the screen for the budget will be put into fiscal year 24 proposal and the CRA division. So when you approve that on the 14th and the 28th, these items, the positions, and all those things that go along with the budget, the positions, the expenses will be in the budget. So you'll formally approve it again there.
And one question, that event salary will change, right, with the increase, correct? The event person?
No, that was put into the scale that was currently adjusted.
Okay.
On July 1.
Right.
Any other comments? All right. You got your
My marching orders. Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. All right, let's move into Section 4, public comments. This section is reserved for members of the public to bring up matters of concern or opportunities for praise. Issues brought up will not be discussed in detail at this meeting. Issues will either be referred to the proper staff or will be scheduled for consideration at a future City Commission meeting. Comments are limited to 3 minutes, and would you please give your name and your address? Any public comment?
Gary Custer, 8909 East Treasure Island Avenue, Leesburg. I've been here before and I talked about Highway 44, County Road 44, and annexation. Prime example of what's going on 44 is the Silver Lake Point, which keeps flooding 44. Talk to the city, and the city says, well, it's the county's problem. It's a county road. Talk to the city, and the city says, well, it's a city. I'm sorry, the other way around. But it was just finger pointing. They're just pointing their finger at the other guy. So we got St. John's involved. St. John's then came and met with the city, met with the site developer, and they kind of solved the problem till the next day when it rained, and it washed away the dam they built. They're damming off the entrance. It's a boulevard entrance, and they're damming off that whole thing. The water comes gushing out of there, washes their dam away. And Al, you sent me pictures of the solution. The 3 layers of silt fence didn't work. It went right around. It came out the road, out the driveway, and down the road it went. We got a hurricane coming. It's going to happen again? Probably. I spoke with one of the individuals that is tasked with taking care of that situation every time it rains. And he said, we tried to tell them it's an engineering problem. He said, I don't know what we can do. We've tried everything. They've got 2 big pumps. They dug their retention ponds down deeper to retain more water, and then they're using these big pumps to pump it back over the hill, back down someplace behind. That's not a solution. It's a Band-Aid. So I don't know if the city doesn't police these things on these new developments, nobody's going to do it. That's why we had to get St. John's involved, because that was all draining down into the swamp at the bottom of the hill. So that's what I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. John Christian, 903 County Road 468, Leesburg, Florida. here tonight to represent the men of distinction. And I may not be here as Commissioner Peterson just gave the budget dates, but I know that on our civic funding, the question came up of the Community Development Corporation's contribution, I think, of $3,800. Those funds are actually used for the Leesburg African American Festival, Black Heritage Festival, hosted by the Men of Distinction. We've been doing that probably about 22 years. Loss of that funding, I want to correct, Al, you asked me was it a ticket event. The gala is a ticket event, but the festival is a free event. Without those funds from the city, we probably won't be able to do the festival. The gala we made, but not the festival, because it's not really a money maker. But Leesburg is the second largest city in Lake County. We're probably the only city that does not have a Black Heritage Festival. In the month of February, we actually do ours in March to coordinate with the other cities and their festival. So I do thank Commissioner Berry for calling me and just pausing that, so the city didn't make that decision. So hopefully I've answered your question what those funds are for. And the CDC is a major sponsor of that event, which is hosted by the Men of Distinction. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other comments? All right. We'll move on to item 5, the consent agenda. Routine items are placed on the consent agenda, to expedite the meeting. If the commission or staff wish to discuss any item, the procedure is as follows. Pull the item or items from the consent agenda, then vote on remaining items with one roll call vote, then discuss each pulled item and vote by roll call. Are there any items that need to be pulled?
Pull 5C2.
5C2. Any other items? Okay. Can we get a motion for approval?
Make a motion to approve.
Go ahead.
Approve all the remaining items.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Reisman,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Berry,
Yes.
Commissioner Connell,
Yes.
Mayor Burry.
Yes. Would someone please introduce 5C2?
I'll introduce and ask to be read by title only.
Resolution of the City Commission of the City of Leesburg, Florida, adopting and approving a Leesburg surplus lot donation program, establishing policies and procedures, and providing an effective date.
Move for approval.
Second.
Discussion?
Yes, I'd like to just go right quickly and just make note of the earlier moratorium that was put on place for the infill lots. First of all, I'd like to say thanks if this is to be approved and move forward, that we have policies and procedures in place, and that's the first and foremost of what I was trying to work towards, to make sure that it was equitable across the board. And I'd like to thank the Housing Development for making sure that that information was provided. Also, I'd like to understand or make the purpose of the policies and procedures to formalize best practice, past practice, which I understood that was there, but for whatever reason we weren't, a contract might have ended or something, but to promote a transparent and fair process for nonprofit partner interested in participating, to encourage as much partner participation as possible, and maximum number of lots is an effective means of monitoring inventory, and it eliminates the possibility of overreaching or monopolizing land by one organization, and a success story for everybody to get the bite of an apple. So for the record, I want to convey my support and enthusiasm for this project. Transparency and fairness is essential, and we all recognize the need for more affordable housing in District 1 as well as in Leesburg. 2 point right quick, I think we have a total of 30, got my notes right here, a total of 36 parcels available, 23 under the City of Leesburg and 13 under the CRA, which 20 parcels are in District 1. I just want to make sure that everyone is clear, and I hope this is, I just want to say it is with great hope that if this passes and goes to vote, we can move forward with releasing the moratorium. That would be my plan, if I could make a motion if it passes.
I just had a couple of questions. I'm in support of it. I was just going to see if you guys would be open to, it says the developer may request a 3-year extension from the city. So the property doesn't sit vacant for 6 years or 3 years. Can we, if nothing happens with the property, after 3 years, it reverts back to the city, not an extension? And then also, some of these properties are multiple acres. So I just want to, if instead of acres, it's a single lot dedication, not acres at a time. If that makes sense, does that make sense?
Doesn't it go by parcels? And I alternate key?
No, so the policy covers donation of city property. So that is any property you may donate. I don't think that this body wants to strap themselves down and define what you are and what you aren't going to donate. I think you want to have some legislative liberties to decide what you want to do. So I think there's going to be different answers. You may want to give the donate these properties that are on the surplus list to some type of activity that isn't contemplated for low to moderate housing. So you don't want to tie this policy to your surplus list. You want the policy that we're creating is a policy on donating surplus properties for the purpose of constructing low to moderate income housing. That's the policy. Don't tie this policy to the surplus list. The surplus list is where you're going to donate these properties. So, for example, on that list, there's a number of lots that are individual lots, building lots, 100 by 50, 100 by 60, 75 by 75, 75 by 75. One lot is 4 acres. And then there's a series of lots in Alabama and Nebraska that has acreage on them. And so, you know, historically that was seen as low to moderate income subdivision. It may be in the future that you don't even want to use Alabama and Nebraska as a housing subdivision, but maybe it's an extension of Berry Park. Maybe it's a commercial endeavor that you want to donate it to. So delineate in your minds lot donation policy for low to moderate income houses versus what lot you're going to donate.
Okay.
Now, the preponderance of vacant lots is in District 1. But again, that doesn't mean that every lot in District 1 is going to be developed for low to moderate income housing. Okay. The policy governs what you're going to donate to not-for-profits for low to moderate income housing. It's put in criteria of who the ultimate owner of that home is. And then Commissioner Reisman, your immediate question was, is if that house doesn't get built in 3 years, can we delineate that it comes back to the city? So that you may want to keep that open. It's open now that says you have to extend it. So that then gives you some discretion to say, yes, we're going to extend it, or nope, we're taking it back. So that comes back to you at the end of the day.
I got you.
I think the policy's written right where you want it. Mm-hmm. It functions. It gives the transparency. It gives the discretion to the commission on who you do and who you don't lend it to, and then it sets time parameters to try to share the wealth of the existing inventory. But don't marry the inventory to the policy. They're separate.
So,
okay, well, question with the existing inventory. We have a lot on District 4 and 2 and District 2 for the city of Leesburg. So would that be open for?
Yes.
Nonprofit. Okay, so all
yes.
of the lots.
All
okay,
the lots.
just
yes.
want to make sure.
So so each lot would come back to commission for approval to donate it before it's given to our partner.
Yes.
And anybody could be a partner if they're a nonprofit organization. It's not confined to 2 or 3 different.
Yes.
Okay, and what, they just come in and apply to the city to be a partner?
They're going to come into the city. They're probably going to give us a request that says, we've been looking at your inventory. We want lot 3321-2, alt key. And then we'll process that on a staff level. We'll make sure that the determination is that's a bona fide 501c3 as they're registered with the Department of State in state of Florida. And then when they meet those clearing checks, we'll bring the request to you with a quick claim deed. That grant will draw up, and what will before you is a quick claim deed resolution that changes title from us to that not-for-profit.
Okay. And I saw in the proposal that it would be a 5-year window. If they sold it or didn't live in it for 5 years, they'd have to pay something back. But I didn't see any provision on there what they would pay the city back. How do we know what the piece of property's worth if we're just giving it away and what they would owe us back?
We can break that down more. I think it probably you may want to establish that in the granting document. You may want to come up with a value that we value this at X dollars. That can be easily determined by fair market value. Most of those lots are probably somewhere between $5 and maybe $10 grand on a single parcel, not the big ones. So we may want to just stick a value in that resolution of changing deed, and that will establish the value. That value will click off by a fifth.
Okay. Well, I mean, should that be in it now before this gets voted on?
I don't think you need that in the policy because each and every one's going to come back to you.
Would it be?
And that's in the policy
so
now.
We're going to determine at the time before we give it away what it's worth? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, your values are going to increase on that inventory, right? You're not unless you give every one of these away next week. Hopefully, the value on those properties increase. So a property we give away today might be $5 grand. A similar property you give away next 3 years might be $7,500.
I mean,
so you don't want to limit yourself.
No, I just don't wonder if there should be something in the resolution that says it has to be done by appraisal at the time before it's granted, or what? I mean, so what method would we use to determine the value of it?
What's in the policy is that you have to have the property for 5 years, a declining value, and so that will go into the agreement and the dedication that this is the established value and this is where the money's going to return. So you don't necessarily need that in the policy, but each and every agreement that you have will have that requirement.
But how is the established value being done, I guess is my question.
We'll do it by what we think the market rate value is. I don't think you want to get an appraiser on each, but I think the city wants to control that. And if we say, if you want this lot, we're going to say the value is $5 grand. And if you're going to argue with me about what the value is, then I'm not going to donate you the land.
Is it fair to say fair market value at a percentage, though, or just?
I just think you keep your options open. I don't think you want to. I know we like rules and structure, and rules and structure have their place. But you also want some wiggle room for your legislative priority, too. So what we've established is a clear and transparent process, and time is going to change. That's why when you guys put together these policies, my hair gets grayer because you guys want to limit, and we want to have all these rules and regulations, and we're trying to get the right rules and regulations and procedures so that we have transparency. But as time passes, you don't want to have to update your policy every year.
Right, and just jumping in on that, I tend to agree with that. I think, as it comes back for each individual one, and there may be, each parcel is different. There may be any number of reasons that impact the value of each property. The city may also have carried certain properties, have cost in properties that are different from one to another as well. So I think, as Al was saying, sort of having a broader policy, but then each one of these is going to come back to the commission so that you can kind of look at each property individually as that donation item is up for consideration and make a determination as to what the fair and equitable figure would be for each lot.
Okay. So the resolution, though, I mean, it has the 5 years in it, but I didn't necessarily see a proration like you're talking about in it that talks about what the proration or what they would pay the city back if it sells or they get rid of it within 5 years, or
The policy has the statement that the money returns. So again, that's something that we're going to put in each and every title exchange. We're going to determine a value, We're going to say it comes back to the city, and you're going to cover it as it comes along to you, because every lot that you donate will come back to this body. This isn't a blank. This policy's not, you're not giving away 30 lots with this policy. You're establishing a way to give away lots. Those lots might not even be in the current inventory. So this is a high-level policy on how you give away each. And then as you give away each, it's going to come before you, and you want to set different parameters based on the different parameters that are associated with each and every lot.
Okay. Any other comment? Now, you had a, were you wanting to make a motion? You're okay with it? Okay. All right. So, roll call?
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Commissioner Berry?
Yes.
Commissioner Connell?
Yes.
Commissioner Reisman?
Yes.
Mayor Burry?
Yes. Okay. Moving on to item 6, public hearings and non-routine items. Tonight we're going to have, actually it's going to be 3 second readings. I'm going to have Grant introduce items 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then I think it was 8. Grant, was that the other?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Why don't you take over?
Yes, sir. I'll go over
swear
the
on in.
items. Now, I know Miss Andy will read off each one of these here coming up, but before we get into these, if anybody's planning to provide any testimony on items 6A3, these are second reading items, 6A3, 6A6, or 6A8, or if you are looking to testify on first reading items 6B1, 6B2, 6B3, 6B4, or 6B6, if you would please stand and raise your right hand so you can be sworn in now. All right. Do you swear or affirm that all testimony you'll give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right. Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Grant. Would someone please introduce items 6A, 1, 2, and 3?
Introduced and asked to be read by title only.
6A1, an ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, annexing certain real property consisting of approximately 1.45 plus minus acres, being generally located west of Whitney Road and north of State Road 44, lying in Section 19, Township 19 South, Range 24 East, Lake County, Florida, providing that said property so annexed shall be liable for its proportionate share of the existing and future indebtedness of said city, providing that such annexed property shall be subject to all laws and ordinances of said city, as if all such territory had been a part of the City of Leesburg at the time of passage and approval of said laws and ordinances, provided that such annexed territory shall be placed in City Commission District 2, and providing an effective date. 6A2, an ordinance amending the future land use map of the comprehensive plan of the City of Leesburg, changing the future land use map designation of certain property containing 1.45 plus minus acres from Lake County Rural Transition to City of Leesburg Institutional for a property generally located west of Whitney Road and north of State Road 44, lying in Section 19, Township 19 South, Range 24 East, Lake County, Florida, and providing an effective date. 6A3, an ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, changing the zoning on approximately 1.45 plus minus acres from Lake County A Agriculture to City of Leesburg P Public for a property generally located west of Whitney Road and north of State Road 44, lying in Section 19, Township 19 South, Range 24 East, Lake County, Florida, and providing an effective date.
For approval.
Second.
All right. So let's have Dan, if you would, please come up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioners, Dan Miller, Planning and Zoning. This is a City of Leesburg electrical substation consisting of approximately 1.45 plus or minus acres. It'd be an annexation of small-scale comp plan and a rezoning. As our city clerk indicated, This would take it from rural transition to institutional on the future land use side, and from Lake County agriculture to City of Leesburg public on the zoning side. It's for a new electrical substation, which will add to our electrical capacity and capability in that area, which is along State Road 44, just west of Whitney Road.
Thank you, Dan. As we are the petitioner, I guess, we won't have a presentation. Once again, you want to?
This is for this substation.
Right, okay. We'll move on from there. Any comments from the public? No comments for the public? Any comments from the commission? No comments? Roll call. Oh, wait a minute. We have to introduce them each one. So,
You did one motion.
but we got to vote on them individually now, right? Yes. So we'll vote first on 6A1.
Right. Commissioner Berry?
Yes.
Commissioner Connell?
Yes.
Commissioner Reisman?
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Mayor Burry?
Yes. Now we'll go to 6A2. Vote on the roll call there.
Does it need an individual motion?
Yes, we will need individual motions for each of the items.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Connell?
Yes.
Commissioner Reisman?
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Commissioner Berry?
Yes.
Mayor Burry?
Yes.
6A3, I'll make a motion to approve.
There you go.
Second.
Commissioner Reisman?
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Commissioner Berry?
Yes.
Commissioner Connell?
Yes.
Mayor Burry?
Yes. Okay. Now would someone please introduce 6A4, 5, and 6?
I'll introduce 6A4, 5, and 6 to be read by title only.
6A4, an ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, annexing certain real property consisting of approximately 0.33 plus minus acres, being generally located approximately 1 mile east of the Florida Turnpike and adjacent to County Road 470, lying in Section 17, Township 20 South, Range 24 East, Lake County, Florida. Providing that said property so annexed shall be liable for its proportionate share of the existing and future indebtedness of said city. Providing that such annexed property shall be subject to all laws and ordinances of said city, as if all such territory had been a part of the City of Leesburg at the time of passage and approval of said laws and ordinances. Providing that such annexed territory shall be placed in City Commission District 2 and providing an effective date. 6A5. An ordinance amending the future land use map of the comprehensive plan of the City of Leesburg, changing the future land use map designation of certain property containing approximately 0.33 plus minus acres from Lake County Public Service Facility and Infrastructure to City of Leesburg age-restricted development for property generally located approximately 1 mile east of the Florida Turnpike and adjacent to County Road 470, lying in Section 17, Township 20 South, Range 24 East, Lake County, Florida, and providing an effective date. 6A6. An ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, changing the zoning on approximately 0.33 plus minus acres from Lake County A agriculture to City of Leesburg ARD age-restricted development to allow for residential uses for property generally located approximately 1 mile east of the Florida Turnpike and adjacent to County Road 470, lying in Section 17, Township 20 South, Range 24 East, Lake County, Florida, and providing an effective date.
Move for approval.
Second. All right. So we'll ask Dan for a staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Several years ago, when the City of Leesburg annexed or sold the property to the villages, they brought forth an area they wanted to have annexed, rezoned, and so forth. 80-some pages of legal description and thousands of words and directions. So we basically 0.33 acres, and that was found out after it was platted, and so villages came and we worked together to want to make this right. It was just an inadvertent leave out, and on a very large, very technical legal. I also wanted to point out that we indicated at the last meeting that this property was included in the original Chapter 163 agreement, and that's noted in the ordinance as well.
Thank you, Dan. Anything from the petitioner? Comments from the public? No comments from the public? Any commission comments? So we'll need a motion to introduce.
I'll make a motion to introduce 6A4 for voting. To approve, sorry.
To approve.
6A4, sorry.
Second that.
Roll call.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Berry,
Yes.
Commissioner Connell,
Yes.
Commissioner Eastman,
Yes.
Mayor Burry.
Yes.
Make a motion to approve 6A5.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Berry,
Yes.
Commissioner Connell,
Yes.
Commissioner Eastman,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Mayor Burry.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve 6A6.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Connell,
Yes.
Commissioner Eastman,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Berry,
Yes.
Mayor Burry.
Yes. Thank you. Someone please introduce 6A7.
I'll make a motion to introduce 6A7 to be read by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Leesburg consenting to the inclusion of the City of Leesburg, Florida, within the countywide municipal service taxing unit for the provision of ambulance and emergency medical services as adopted by the Board of County Commissioners of Lake County, Florida, providing for the city to be included within said MSTU for a specific term of years, providing for conflicts, and providing an effective date.
Move for approval.
Second.
Discussion? No comments. Roll call.
Commissioner Eastman,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Berry,
Yes.
Commissioner Connell,
Yes.
Mayor Burry.
Yes. Someone please introduce 6A8.
I'll introduce 6A8 to be read by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, changing the zoning on approximately 11 plus minus acres from City of Leesburg SPUD Small Plan Unit Development and R3 High Density Residential to City of Leesburg SPUD Small Plan Unit Development for a property generally located east of Executive Boulevard and south of State Road 44, lying in Section 29, Township 19 South, Range 24 East, Lake County, Florida, and providing an effective date.
Move for approval.
Second.
Can we have a staff presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is for the Good News Church. This is to amend an existing small plan unit development for the Good News Church to add property which consists of the lot immediately to the south. That property is currently zoned R3 high density residential, and it sits in the middle of an industrial park. It's approximately 11.3 acres total. The request is to add a use for police canine training, and so it would take that R3 out of the industrial, which staff would like to see. The police department can use it for various purposes under this SPUD, but mainly working with other police departments and for the canine training. We don't anticipate any negative impacts on this. Mr. Greg Beliveau of LPG is here, as well as Captain Scott Mack of our police department. To answer any other questions.
I do have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
The church owns this,
Church owns it.
and they're going to allow the police department to use it for canine training?
That is correct. It's basically that field out there. I think there's some goalposts or something. A lot of it is wetlands. This is a perfect use because it's going to be tough to build on. And the church has been working with LPG and the police department as well.
They're just going to let anybody use it, or they rent it? Or?
No, this is an agreement with the police department. I believe Mr. Belbo has some additional facts for you. Can get you some additional details.
Greg Beliveau with LPG and a member of the church and member of the board of the church. The police department was looking for a place to train for the canines, and there's an existing ball field there that's on this property. We bought the property from the Boys and Girls Club years ago. So when we bought the ball field, a few years after we bought the parent track, we've been using it as a ball field and a recreation area for the church. And we've been having problems in that neck of the woods for a few years. Drag races at night when the church is closed, and a few other items that deal with syringes that are left on the ground, and a few other things, since it's got rather dark and secluded down there and the church isn't open. So when the police department asked if they wanted to use this for canine training, we thought that was a great idea, considering some of the activity that was going on down there, that we'd chase people off, and we'd call LP, the police department, to come down and chase out people. By the time they got there, people were gone, or because they knew we were calling people. So we think it's a great marriage between the church and the police department. We're not charging the police department anything. It's a freebie. So we think it's two nonprofits working together. Well, you guys definitely nonprofit after today's meeting. So we think it's a great marriage between the two. So so for us, it's a great opportunity for you all to have your police department down there with the dogs, and obviously making their presence known on a regular basis, and making the neighborhood know that they're there. Makes all the industrial folks know that your presence is there. I think that's going to make them a little happier as well. So, so when they asked it, we jumped at it and said thank you. Now here's the funny part. You're going to love this part. He's going to laugh a little bit too, because they came down and started working, and then Leesburg code enforcement showed up and said, nay, 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 they couldn't come down there. And we had to amend our PUD. Now, we thought it's being a public use, and we were a semi-public use, we could skirt them in our existing PUD, and we're told, no, we had to amend our PUD. So that's how come we're here. So your trusted code enforcement caught your police department on church property, and we are here. So just to let you know that all of your arms of some type of enforcement are working. So you're getting your money's worth, gentlemen and ladies. So that's how we're here.
Okay. Thank you, Greg.
And for the public's benefit, the code enforcement does fall under the police department.
They're literally like 4 doors down.
That's a good thing that never crossed my desk.
So, how about some comments from the public? Anybody have any comments? All right. Any commission deliberation? Roll call.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Commissioner Berry?
Yes.
Commissioner Cunnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Reisman?
Yes.
Mayor Burry?
Yes. Would someone please introduce 6A9?
689.
Introduced, has to be read by title only.
Second.
An ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, amending the City Code of Ordinances by amending Chapter 5, Section 5-6, consumption of and open containers prohibited on public property, exceptions, amending Section 5-6.2, consumption of or possession of alcohol in open containers near stores selling alcoholic beverages, amending Chapter 18, streets, sidewalks, and other public places, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for inclusion in the Code of Ordinances, and providing for an effective period and effective date.
Move for approval.
Second.
Discussion? No comments? Roll call.
Commissioner Berry?
Yes.
Commissioner Cunnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Reisman?
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Mayor Burry?
Yes. Okay, so we'll move into first reading of ordinances. We've already sworn in anyone that wants to talk. I don't know if we have
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
anybody new.
Yeah, is there anybody new that's come in or that was not previously sworn in for the first reading items that would like to be sworn in? Looks like we're all set.
Good deal. Someone please introduce 6B1.
I'll introduce 6B1 to be read by title only.
Excuse me. An ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, ratifying and readopting Ordinance 17-07 pertaining to a change in the future land use element of the City of Leesburg Comprehensive Plan to establish the Orange Bend future land use designation and creating applicable goals, objectives, and policies, and ratifying and readopting Ordinance 17-08 pertaining to a change in the future land use map to Orange Bend for property generally situated in Section 33, Township 18 South, Range 25 East, Lake County, Florida, to ensure compliance with the procedures of Chapter 163, Florida statutes for adopting large-scale comprehensive plan amendments related to said property, directing transmittal to the reviewing agencies, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
So we don't need a motion for approval. This is a first reading. Do you want to talk about just what we're doing?
Actually, the item here, it would be 6B, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 concern final transmittal. So after a municipal corporation goes through an annexation, land use, zoning case, at the end of it, you close the loop by notifying the Department of Economic Opportunity. I didn't say DCA. That the final hearing was done, and you closed the matter, and the state lists it. We got caught in the electric, trying to go from paper submittals to non-paperless, and we electrically submitted the final closing, but the state says, we never got your stuff. We say, yes, you do. The state said, well, why don't you do this cure ordinance just to make sure everything is all good? So that happened on 5 subdivisions: Orange Bend, Leesburg Fruit Company, Silver Lake Estates, which is the golf course, old golf course, Ranches of Orlando, and then item 6 is the windmill properties. So that's a repeat for item 2, 3, 4, and 6.
And these were approved 2015-ish.
Different times between 2015 and
2015 and 2017.
Right.
We were trying to go electronic.
That's fine. That's fine.
Would it be more efficient to go ahead and read them all and then vote on them individually?
Actually,
we're not voting on them.
vote. I think we're just reading and letting everybody know what we're doing is what I really wanted to get across. So
Yeah, and just jumping in there for the first reading on these, the next step would be the transmittal to the state agencies, and then it would come back for second reading after that transmittal takes place.
And we won't be able to give you a date on the second readings because we don't know when we'll get the transmittals back. So that's all. So let's move on to 6B2.
6B2 to be read by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, ratifying and readopting Ordinance 15-46 pertaining to a change in future land use to medium-density residential for property generally situated in Section 16, Township 19 South, Range 24 East, Lake County, Florida, to ensure compliance with the procedure of Chapter 163 Florida statutes for adopting large-scale comprehensive plan amendment relating to said property, directing transmittal to the reviewing agencies, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Any discussion? Everybody fine? Someone would please introduce.
I'll introduce 6B3 to be read by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, ratifying and readopting Ordinance 15-51 pertaining to a change in future land use to estate residential for property generally situated in Section 1, Township 19 South, Range 25 East, Lake County, Florida, to ensure compliance with the procedures of Chapter 163 Florida statutes for adopting large-scale comprehensive plan amendments related to said property, directing transmittal to reviewing agencies, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Any comments? 6B4.
I'll introduce 6B4 to has to be read by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, ratifying and readopting Ordinance 15-43 pertaining to a change in the future land use to estate residential for property generally located in Section 27, Township 20 South, Range 24 East, Lake County, Florida, to ensure compliance with the procedures of Chapter 163, Florida statutes for adopting large-scale comprehensive plan amendments relating to said property, directing transmittal to the reviewing agencies, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Any comment? Ready?
Go ahead.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce 6 and let's get it done, and then we'll go back to 5.
I'll introduce 6B6 to be read by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, ratifying and readopting Ordinance 17-16 pertaining to a change in future land use to estate residential for property generally located in Section 25, Township 20 South, Range 24 East, Lake County, Florida, to ensure compliance with the procedures of Chapter 163, Florida statutes for adopting large-scale comprehensive plan amendments related to said property, directing transmittal to the reviewing agencies, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Any comment? All right.
6B5 to be read by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, establishing the County Road 33 Community Development District pursuant to Chapter 190 Florida statutes, providing for authority and power of the district, establishing the district, providing for the Board of Supervisors of the district, providing for the district budget, providing for functions of the district, providing for miscellaneous provisions, and providing an effective date.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Discussion on this. Dan, I did have a question. This is for two different subdivisions that are partnering together for this district, or how
Yes,
does that
sir.
work?
Hanover Homes is going to be the developer on both properties. One is Battaglia,
Right.
which is somewhere around 450, 500 units, and the other is Banning Ranch, which I think will end up in total about 500 units. They are both on County Road 33 south of the Turnpike and on opposite sides of the road, but it's the same developer.
area.
Yes, sir.
Any questions from anyone regarding?
6B7 to be read by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Leesburg, Florida, amending the City Code of Ordinances by amending Chapter 22, Section 22-7, Natural Gas Line Installation Procedures to clarify the residential development units to which natural gas line and appliance installation requirements apply, providing for severability, providing for inclusion in the Code of Ordinances, providing of conflicts, and providing an effective date.
Any questions from? So this will come back, do we know?
September 11th.
So this will come back for a second reading September 11th. If we could now move on to non-routine items, 6C.
I'd like to introduce 6C1 to be read by title only.
Resolution of the City Commission of the City of Leesburg, Florida, authorizing an investigation of traffic data and other information related to the potential installation of speed detection systems on roadways maintained as school zones within the City of Leesburg and providing an effective date.
Move for approval.
Second. Discussion.
Just want to clarify, this is just the first step. We have to do a study.
Correct.
It'll come back to us again. So I think I would really like to see the study. I've talked to the school board about this. I've talked to numerous principals. They're all highly in favor of this. So.
I got a couple questions. I spoke to Al earlier today a couple times about this. The study, it's my understanding someone else is going to do the study? We will provide some input, but somebody else will do it?
Yes. So essentially the process goes is there's companies that will install the school zone cameras. They'll help us with the study. They'll help us with the process. Essentially, the process is there needs to be a survey done that shows that there's need for that they're speeding and there's need for the safety cameras. And in areas where school zones are not within Leesburg right-of-way, but for example, county right-of-way, we will need to get county authorization to install the cameras in their right-of-ways. Off the top of my head, the two school zones that are county-related would be the high school on US 27 and Oak Park and Leesburg Elementary on, I guess that's Dixie, South Street. Roughly, most of the other school districts, Griffin, Carver, the Montessori, all on city roads. So then the statute requires that this be done by an ordinance. So to kick off the process, I wanted to pose this concept to the commission, make sure everybody was in agreement to at least start the study on it. By passing this resolution, what we will do then is we will do an RFP seeking a security seeking a school zone camera company to help us do the survey, to help us survey the county, and then to put the ordinance together that would come back to you. At that time, we'll have better outlays on the agreement, on how collections will go, what the city will receive, what they will receive, and what each party, the city's responsibilities, and say the vendor's responsibilities would be. That would come back to you in ordinance form.
So tonight is just to approve for you to put an RFP out, or for you to hire a company to do this?
It will be to put the RFP out, and ultimately the next step will then be to do a survey, and then it will come back to you in the form of an agreement with the county approvals and an agreement to approve the vendor that will probably be embedded in the ordinance.
Okay, so
it's coming back to you.
So, but who's doing the survey?
The company, the vendor that the RFP seeks. That will be part of the RFP process for the security camera.
That be part of their proposal, or something after we select
we will,
the company?
That will be part of their proposal.
Okay, so they would all know going in, they'll do it.
Am I explaining that correctly?
Another step will include completing the study, which is already underway by LPD.
Right. Well, portions of the survey are being done by the LPD, so we'll turn that information over to the vendor.
So, but I guess what I'm trying to make sure is
we'll do an RFP. We'll get the vendor to help us do the survey. Coming back to you will be the survey, the ordinance, and an agreement with the vendor.
And if we
so
decide
we'll
not to
force
move-
the vendor to do the survey with us.
And if we decide not to move forward, is he going to want to be recouped for what he's got?
We'll determine that at the time of the RFP and those negotiations, and we'll report back to you accordingly.
Okay. I mean, it's probably preliminary to get into all the stuff we spoke about earlier today.
There's some moving parts.
Yes, I still want some real clarification of what
That
we're
will
doing
come
with
from the
those.
RFP.
I'm talking about the citation board.
I mean, we can talk about that real briefly. I think the conversation I had with Commissioner Connell was, is this going to increase the city's costs? The immediate answer is no, it doesn't increase the cost. Those costs are shifted to the vendor. There could be cost increases that would come in the form of how citations ultimately would be issued. So the vendor would install the camera would take a picture of the speeder, speeder would then get a civil violation or a fine of $100. 90% of those typically are paid for, no questions asked by the offender. A civil violation does not come with any points on your license or any ramifications to your driving record, but it does have the fine of $100. And like I say, 90% of those are typically paid. Hopefully folks then, that's punitive and they're more careful when they're going through the school zones. The 10% part of that is the transference of a civil infraction to a moving vehicle citation, which then does have implication on that. In Lake County, typically the state's attorney's office does not process civil infractions. In this case, we are assuming that the vendor will want to prosecute those type of infractions to receive the 50% of the revenue that they've invested in the systems. So the tool that we have then to change that infraction from a civil citation to a uniform traffic citation is the special magistrate. So for that 10% of cases, that Rob is looking back at me like I didn't quite get it, but I got it close enough. So those then would go before the special magistrate, who our special magistrate is Kim Schulte, who's an attorney, and she would then serve as kind of the traffic court and enforce those fines. And in that process, then that's where the defendant would, have to say who was driving, these type of things, so that then Kim could, or Ms. Schulte could then adequately determine how to apply the fine. And so in that process, yes, probably some additional police cases, because then instead of going to, typically now you get a speeding citation and you challenge that, you meet your ticketing officer in Tavares before the circuit court or the district court, right? District court before circuit court on traffic incidents, and in this case, instead of going to Tavares, the officer would come here before the special magistrate, and they duke it out. In that process, yes, there, I don't see it as a significant amount of additional increased costs. You have some additional increased administrative for the officer who's issuing the ticket. You save him or her 30 minutes driving back and forth to DeVaries instead of City Hall. But probably where you see the increased costs is the special magistrate meetings last a little longer. So I think you probably see your special magistrate invoices go up a little bit. I don't think I don't think the financial unknowns are a make it or break it here, and it's really. And I don't know what 10% is. Is it 1-2 tickets a month that don't get paid, or is it 500? I would guess it's closer to a handful a month that you ultimately have to deal with. Just for the record, too, in other conversation with the commission, I'll make public, Commissioner Reisman noted that he has spoken with City of Eustis about this, who's kind of in the process of putting this together, and it was actually pretty well received by the City of Eustis in terms of limiting speeding issues in the school zones. So hopefully some of the other ramifications that are associated with red light cameras and those type of things, it's a little bit mitigated by the impact, which is to see driving safety for our children, pedestrians who are in and out of those school zones. And the cameras would only go during the flashing lights. So when the flashing lights are on, the cameras are on. When the flashing lights are off, the cameras are off.
That was my question. Could this be after school hours as well?
Whenever the answer is when the statute allows us to do this, whenever the camera, whenever the lights are, whenever the school zone is functional, the camera is on, and when the school zone is off, the cameras are off.
That's right. Al's exactly right. The law has time parameters in there in terms of the before school, after school hours, during school hours, so that is regulated. It's also specifically for speeding. It's not for other types of surveillance during off-school hours. Now, if there were some incidental crime that were caught on camera, then that still could be something that's prosecuted, used as evidence for prosecution. But really the idea with this is specific to speeding cameras during the school time hours or just before or after when the kids are around.
Obviously, I'm all for child safety, but I'm scratching my head on one thing. I have two comments, but first of all, the vendor, obviously this is a moneymaker for them. I guess that troubles me a little bit. I mean, they're funding all this because it's a moneymaker. It's going to aggravate a lot of residents. I'll stop right there. I might come back to that, and I welcome any other comments. But the other thing, help me out on this one. The city of Orlando implemented cameras for people running red lights, and then they reversed their decision due to all the controversy. So I just kind of draw a little analogy to that. And I'm not sure where I stand on this. I mean, I probably support it, from a child safety standpoint, but I do want to, I don't remember the issues on Orlando red lights, but I don't know if it was a legal threat against the city or what it was. But I just want to bring these two items to the attention.
Keith Trunow and Taylor Yarkowski passed something.
Okay.
Let's ask Chief Hicks.
Yeah, help me out, Chief.
Department. So the cities or counties that got rid of them were for the first reason that you mentioned, because it irritated people. There was a study that showed it reduced head-on collisions by 70%, but it increased side collisions it reduced by a significant number, but it increased rear ends by more because they saw, there's a camera, and they'd slam the brakes on and they would get hit in the rear. So that was an issue. It was mostly a political issue of people didn't want to be on cameras, and so red light cameras were pulled out of quite a few cities, Claremont being one of them, but there are still a ton of cities that still have red light cameras. Okay. So that was the issue. And the speed zone cameras, like you were saying, is specifically just for that specific area. They are not ALPRs, so they're not recording the tags as far as sending them to a database to pull somebody else out of. So it's essentially for that. There are a ton of companies that are up, and yes, it is a profiteering model for it.
So, I think you see where I'm going with that, and I'm just throwing it out to be sure the commission is thinking it through all the way. But I appreciate it. I thought the only one I ever read about was Orlando on red lights. I did not know other cities had tried it. So I appreciate your input there.
And I believe Orlando still does have them, just not as many.
Okay.
I have a question for you, Chief. If this goes in front of the special magistrate, obviously I'm assuming you're taking the advice from our vendor that this person was going this miles per hour through the zone. Who on your department would testify in front of the special magistrate that is an accurate statement?
All right, so the only missing step that Mr. Minner had was that we certify every citation, right? And so that's where the cost associated to us at the police department would be. I would use one of the police service aides that you guys were gracious enough to approve for me last year to review them. What happens is all of the citations that are written come with the tag number and the speed from the camera. An officer looks at them. I was told it takes about 15 seconds per citation for the officer, so they can do it once or twice a week to get all of them done. And then if they challenge it, so for example, I loaned my car to somebody. You can write an affidavit saying I loaned it to my brother, and my brother was the one speeding. So I forget what they call it, but it's a tattletale deal, right? Because someone's paying the $100.
Sure.
So you can do that, or if it's a company truck, then the company can then protest and say, well, I don't know which driver drove it that particular day. And then that's when it would go in front of the magistrate, and then she would make the decision whether that's a good enough excuse or do you have responsibility for your vehicles going through those zones. So it is the officer or the police service aide who approves, certifies the citation that would be going in front of the magistrate.
But it's based on the photos that are sent to us.
Correct. If there's any, I met with 3 or 4 vendors just talking to them about their product, and there's different business models that are going. If there's any confusion, the tag is not 100% bright, any issue whatsoever, they're not sending. They always err on the side of not sending it out.
Okay. What does a speeding in the school zone ticket cost? So
if you set the parameters at 11. It would be over $300 for that citation, plus 3 or 4 points on your license. I'd have to look it up exactly, but it's significant over the $100, and that's why they're at a 90 or 90+% pay.
You say 11, meaning 11 miles an hour over?
11 miles an hour over, because so in the state of Florida, you can drive up to 5 miles an hour over the speed limit with just getting a warning. You can still get pulled over, but you get a written warning. Over that is you can get a citation for, but taking into account people's speedometer, like there's a lot of things that are off, so you try to set that at a number that's a reasonable number. And so 11 over in a school zone that's 15, if you see a car driving 25 miles an hour, that's not a shocking number. You're not going, oh, that they're endangering people. The 15 is on purpose because they know that there's going to be people going already over. So now the people that usually go 25 through there, they want to run a little bit faster even. So this just gets it out. And in all reality, you get that $100 chip on you, and that's your normal way to work, you're going to slow down when you go through that school zone.
And there's a 30-day grace period and on the tickets, correct?
Correct.
And then you put their signs posted. And I drive through 2 school zones every day, and obviously we can't have cops at every school zone morning and night. And I am constantly being passed by speeders while kids are on the sidewalk crossing the road. So,
what is the term of this contract? Is it a typical city contract where we can cancel, like have our 60-day termination clause?
So that's going to be part of the RFP for sure. I spoke with a couple of vendors. One wants to do, they want to kind of do a 5-year contract, but that's also going to depend on the survey. So we have an exorbitant number of school zones in our city. We have 7 schools. We have like 11 or 12 school zones. I mean, it's significant. And so it's a profit model. So how much money are they going to make on it would do that. One of the companies I spoke to said we can do, and it's the company that Eustis is using, said that we can do a walk-away clause, no harm, no foul. The other ones are there's leased equipment involved and all that stuff. So that would be part of how we want to specifically write that RFP.
you don't have to answer this, but can I ask you what your opinion is of this?
I like it from the aspect of we get lots of complaints in the school zones. There's no reason to speed through a school zone. I like it from the aspect of there is a grace period. It's a $100 no point ticket. $100 is a lot of people for a lot of money, but we have people's kids walking through that section. Not necessarily a fan of a profit-based enforcement model, which that is, but that's the nature of the business. But when you weigh it out, I mean, ultimately somebody's paying for the enforcement of safety, and in school zones, I think it's kudos on them for coming up with that aspect of it. But it's much less punitive if that steady camera reminder's there all the time than if every once in a while we can get an officer in a school zone and zap you with a $400 or $500 ticket.
Thank you, Chief.
Any other questions? So do we, where do we move on this?
You vote on the resolution. Yeah, you vote on the resolution.
And then
and if you vote yes if the vote of the resolution is yes, we'll move forward into the RFP and keep in touch. If you say no on the resolution, concept dies.
Gotcha.
And if it's appropriate, I'm going to go ahead and say I will vote yes, but I'm not going to be happy. I will not support a 5-year contract later. I mean, I'd like to see it, at least 1, 2, or 3 years, just in case we get a ton of complaints.
And I will agree with that. We can put a good severability clause in there.
Even 1 or 2, but that's my only comment.
Any other comments? Roll call.
Commissioner Connell?
Yes.
Commissioner Eastman?
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Commissioner Berry?
Yes.
Mayor Burry?
Yes. Okay, so someone please introduce
I'll
6C2.
introduce 6C2 to be read by title only.
Resolution of the City Commission of the City of Leesburg, Florida, authorizing acquisition and installation of a newborn infant safety device at the Canal Street Fire Station for the purpose of receiving a surrendered newborn infant, providing treatment, and providing transportation to the nearest hospital having emergency services, directing the city manager to oversee and ensure acquisition and installation of the newborn infant safety device and providing an effective date.
Move for approval.
Second.
Discussion.
Would you guys be open to me allowing the president of Rotary coming up and giving a brief talk about it?
Sure, that's good.
This is Amanda McLee.
I'll be brief. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this. I'm Amanda McLee, the president of Leesburg Sunrise Rotary. So this is just a kind of a safety box for newborn surrendered infants. As you know, Florida is a safe haven state, so a newborn infant can be brought to a safe haven location within the first 7 days of birth, as long as it's unharmed and surrendered. So this just gives the opportunity for that parent to do this in an anonymous manner. So this allows them to bring it to a safe spot, put it into a box. It's temperature controlled, it's locked from the outside, and then a silent alarm is placed to our fire station and also to 911. So this would not be any fee to the city. It would be fully funded by our Rotary Club and maintained as such throughout its course being there. So I hope that you'll fully support that. I have some folks in the audience that we've talked to. I've talked to a few of you, and I appreciate your time tonight. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So current policy is we surrender, a child could be surrendered to a emergency services personnel. Do we record who is surrendering? I mean, is there,
She'd let Grant kind of tackle the current policy, the statute that failed, and
give us.
Yeah, I'll give you a brief rundown. So the current statute version contemplates surrender of the newborn infant to a human being. It doesn't allow, and it extends a liability shield to those individuals who would treat and or transport the newborn infant under those circumstances where they're surrendered in person. The statute does not clearly allow surrender of the newborn infant for treatment, transport, and then liability shield if the infant's surrendered to a box or a medical device or something like that. There was a bill in the legislature that was making its way through this last session that would have included the infant safety device as a means or an avenue where the parent or someone else could surrender the newborn. However, that legislation did not pass. So the current version of the law contemplates delivery of the newborn to a human. There was a law that was intended to expand the options to allow surrender to a newborn infant safety device, created standards for those devices, but that law did not pass. So, I think that the infant safety device is generally consistent with the intention or the goals of the safe haven law, which is to provide an avenue for a newborn infant to be surrendered safely, treated, transported, and then moved through placement services. But, from a legal perspective, I certainly have concerns when the statute addresses delivering the child to a person. There was legislation intended to close that problem off, but it didn't pass. So it leads me to believe there is a gap there, or else the legislature would not have been looking to close that gap. And so that's the concern I have, is potential liability for the city or somebody that might treat and or transport the infant if it was not surrendered in strict compliance with the statutory parameters.
Just for clarification, there's like 160 of these around the country. One being included is Ocala. So Ocala has one as well.
That's right. I did see one that Ocala, and I think they had a success story from their box as well, if I'm not mistaken, that they had one infant surrendered, and that infant was adopted ultimately, perhaps by the firefighter.
She was adopted by the firefighter, yes, that rescued her.
How many infants have we had surrendered to emergency? None? None here.
I was going to ask the same question. Over what period of time? I mean, say the last 5 years. Are you saying none?
Last 21 years.
Last 21 years, none?
Last 27 years.
27? Okay. No, thank you.
May I ask how many have been reported at a dumpster or on a step somewhere?
Yeah, the reason Commissioner Rietzman brought this to my attention, I thought it was a topic that really needed the consideration and the deliberation of the legislative body. I didn't want to make an administrative call on this for really the liability issues on it. And I think we talked about liability with Bike Fest, and I think there's shades difference of types of liability in this because there's pre-established law and case law on what happens to a city if they were the sponsor of a beer distributor, where this is clearly, there's not case law, there's not a judicial review on what happens if a baby dies in the custody of public safety, and then with the delineation of a bill that didn't pass, which leads Grant to his legal conclusion at this time based on the information. So, so on one hand, you have a system where we're already an established safe haven. If you go to the Canal Fire Station on the side of the door there on Canal Street, there's a sign that says "Baby Safe Haven." This isn't a speech to say don't do this. It's just for informational purposes. So if you do change the process, we will work with the Sunshine Rotary Group. The way I understand it is that they have the funds to get the baby box in place, and we'll march to your direction. We just thought we needed to disclose the changes, and obviously there's benefits. As Ms. McClue pointed out, the ability for the parent to have a more secure environment to distribute the baby, if that's the right word.
I want to add too that part of this process is the ability to provide counseling and crisis counseling for that parent. I'm gonna say mother just because for simplicity, but they have resources within that box. So once it's opened, if they decide this is not what's going to happen, there's packet of information, crisis hotline. They are very advertising of this is a last resort. So we're not advertising drop your baby off. My dad actually said, "What if there's a line, Amanda?" I'm like, "Jesus, Dad." So I guess it's a valid question, but that's not really what they're advertising it to do. It's just a safe thing. I guess I question back. I understand the liability. That's what I do in my job. But one of the questions I say is, what happens if they just leave it on the doorstep? What happens? They still got to take it, right? They still got to pick up that baby and take it to the hospital. So we still have the liability of a baby that's been left at the doorstep. This is one box in the state of Florida. It's in Ocala. So I challenge you to really think through that liability for our community. As a mother of 5, I have a blended family of birth 2 of my own. I cannot imagine being in that position. And it's not necessarily out of just I don't want a baby and I want to get rid of it. It's out of shame. And I can't imagine walking into the fire department and handing my baby to someone. So thank you for your consideration.
I have a question for Grant. Just to clarify, did you say if you drop your infant off to an individual, like a fireman, a policeman, then there's legislation out there that would limit the liability, but if we have a drop-off box, that there's no liability there, or the city could incur a lot more liability in that particular case.
That's right, yeah, and I'll read you exactly. It's very short from the statute. It says, if a newborn infant is placed in the physical custody of an employee or agent of a licensee or fire department, such placement shall be considered implied consent for treatment and transport. A licensee, fire department, or an employee or agent of a licensee or fire department is immune for criminal or civil liability for acting in good faith pursuant to this section, but not for their own negligence. So you do have that shield for that sort of personal delivery for the fire department, the employees, and everybody working at the fire department as well. Yes, sir. So that's written in. Again, with the legislative change, that shield would have extended to the baby box, but since the infant newborn safety device, but since that wasn't passed, that liability shield still is only applicable to those scenarios.
Do you have any additional information as to why it didn't pass?
No, sir.
I mean, no.
Don't know. It died in committee.
Oh, so did it die in committee or did it not pass?
Died in committee. Okay. So I'm not exactly sure. There's a staff analysis sort of giving the background of the situation, but don't really have too much information on why it didn't move through.
Again, I'll just bring up with the commission with no specific agenda behind the statement is this is just I didn't want the commission to question why we were cutting a hole in the fire station without having this discussion about liability. And as we talk about liability with a bunch of different stuff, I think the liability that we're talking about is a high extreme. You've heard from the chiefs that you're talking 0 in the last 27 years. I don't see an onslaught of babies being dropped in the boxes at Canal Station. It certainly, I think, is a legitimate endeavor to help promote safety of the young the infants in the community. Liability is an issue out there, and so I think it was important to have the public discussion. Note that the liability is an extreme matter, rather than we're going to have 100-fold tripping claim suits than we are before. We're going to have a suit about this type of stuff. But you needed to have that. You need to have this conversation before we start cutting a hole in the wall.
I think if it saves one baby, that's worth it.
I was going to say the same thing, but I was also going to ask, can we do this at the hospital? Has that been?
We had the conversation. I'll disclose. I had the conversation with Phil Braun. I don't know Phil's specific.
Further and promote it in the community, make it known. But I'm just throwing that out too.
We had the conversation with Mr. Braun. Mr. Braun. I think Mr. Braun struggled with the same thing we're struggling with, so we're dealing with it. It's on your desk. I don't, sorry, I don't mean that in a bad way, but, the same issues that we have, they're going to have as well. The number one issue is Canal is the number one busiest fire station in Lake County. Number two is Griffin. So our two primary baby drop-off areas would be one of those two stations, and 8 times out of 10, the station does not have emergency personnel there because they're out on a call because it's that busy. And again, it's just a statistical thing. I think we're in the abstracts. The hospital is going to struggle with this same type of liability. The hospital is going to struggle with doctors and nurses who are taxed with their work, and who's going to get the baby out of the box if they're tied up. So these are all totally extreme circumstances. I think probably 99 times out of 100, or probably even if you want to go even more extreme, 999,000 times out of 1 million, we're not going to have a problem. But the public conversation needed to be had, so we're aware of what's going on, and everybody has reviewed it in a public manner and issued a formal directive to change the legislative policy from the baby sanctuary to the baby drop box.
Obviously, we would hope this box would never be used, so that's what we would hope. But if it gives an option to a single mother who is at her last resort to drop it there, I would like to give her that option.
Yeah, and I think sort of tying on to what Al said, really the idea is, certainly the commission has the ability to do what you all see fit and what you think's best. But what we don't want to do is have questions come up later about, well, this wasn't included within the legislation and that kind of thing. So we just want to make sure that everyone's fully informed in terms of the issues at play, so that y'all can make the best decision that you want to make.
One question I don't know if anybody could answer, but you said Ocala is the only city in the state in Florida that has this, and how many babies have been surrendered to that box in Ocala, and how long have they had it?
I think they've had it since 2020.
About 2020. Sandra Wilson, our housing director, was their city manager. So it was about the time that Sandra was the city manager up in Ocala that they put the boxes in. And it just so happened that Sandra, Joe, Mara, and myself were in the office when we were talking to Grant. So.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great idea, but, with what Grant has said and the lack of other municipalities in the state other than one doing this, and the hospitals don't even want to do this, I think there's some reason for that, and I think it really probably is the liability. And I just, I think, we got numerous fire departments, we got a hospital here. I mean, they want to, drop their child off. There's numerous possibilities versus just putting it, the child in a box and driving away. And I think the lack of support from the other cities throughout the state speaks volume that most jurisdictions don't want to get into this liability, nor does the hospitals.
Is there an agreement on this? Are we bound? There's no contractual agreement here. This is a nonprofit funding this for our benefit, for the city's benefit.
Yeah,
I guess if legislation changes or the commission, I don't know. I guess I want to know our out, how we get out of it if we need to.
You come back and have the same meeting and say take the baby box out.
Okay.
So you vote on this and pass it tonight. Our staff will get with Rotary and we'll start establishing how we get the baby box in. Probably the canal station. If you get 3 yeses, if it's 3 no's, we won't move forward. And if we have issues, then like we do with everything, we'll review it as we move forward.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Reisman?
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Commissioner Berry?
Yes.
Commissioner Connell?
No.
Mayor Burry?
Yes. We'll move on to item 7, informational reports. There are none. City attorney items.
And this evening, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. City manager items.
I don't have any matters for you. Just to let y'all know, obviously there's a storm of brewing. The EOC and the emergency team is in place. We've already kind of started our preliminary prep. We'll keep an eye on the storm. We've got the latest information up on our website and the Facebook page. Make sure you have all your supplies. Be safe. Monitor our website and the county's website, and probably more determination about noon tomorrow on what we do with closings. The county and the school board have already decided to close for Wednesday. The city of Tavares has already decided to close for Wednesday, and they're closing at noon tomorrow. But I think the noon hour will give us more information and the latest, and so we'll be watching the storm. Any questions, please let me know. And of course, our emergency management director with Chief Mara, we're on it.
Roll call.
Commissioner Berry? Nothing else. Sorry. Commissioner Peterson?
Nothing tonight.
Commissioner Reisman?
A couple things. I would like to invite everyone out to the Leesburg Blue Foundation 5K at the Leesburg Airport on 9/9. It'll be a fun time running the runways. We're up to 218 participants. So there's a QR code, or go to the Leesburg the Facebook page and search Leesburg Blue Foundation 5K. All the proceeds benefit the Leesburg Blue Foundation. I want to let everyone know we have a lot of vacancies on our boards. So if you're a Leesburg resident, go to the City of Leesburg website. We have a lot of vacancies, and we would love to have your application for consideration. The last one is the Lakefront TV RFP. Al and I talked about this. Al, is there any part of that RFP or designated for marketing and branding?
We did not put marketing and branding per se in the RFP. The RFP sought to get out public dissemination, media in English, the video segments that Dr. Anna Marie and Fachi Bella does for us, where she profiles the different departments or accomplishments or different businesses. So it's that kind of TV media production that is broadcast on Lakefront TV, as well as the airing of these meetings and our public meetings on Lakefront TV. The budget for that is $175,000 a year. That's in the, I think it's a public information section of the general fund where we pay that bill. So the RFP contemplates just that service. In your mission meeting back in, when we do that in May, we did talk about rebranding the city. We did not budget that concept. There was talk about maybe we need to do that, but we didn't tackle that in this fiscal year's budget. I think you could probably put the marketing concept into the RFP. I think that's two different kind of delivery methods, though, because you have the TV production side. I think the bigger question there is the media. This isn't a Fachi Bella comment or a production comment. It's Lakefront TV. Lakefront TV is the city's entity. That's the JPEG that we use that disseminates a public message, a broadcast on the access that we get as a requirement from the state that information companies are required to provide to cities by state law. Is that media getting out the message? We had that conversation briefly at the workshop. I don't think collectively we said we want to look at it, but we really didn't dive into it anymore. So the RFPA does not contemplate that. I think it's something that we could probably drill down into. I would advise if you want that marketing message to be in the RFP, that probably would be difficult because it would probably require redrafting it.
Okay.
When you say marketing, like marketing the city to companies, marketing, I'm trying to understand.
Well, I know we're sports tourism, but in our meeting, we don't have who are we, what are we. We don't have that. So it was based off our visioning session that we all had.
I think as I see marketing, that way I understood it was, I think Tavares is probably the classic example how they marketed and branded themselves the Seaplane Capital, and that was a very successful marketing campaign. We've been the lakefront city now for, I don't know how long, a long time. Is that marketing, is that concept, is that image what we want to do? So at least when I think of marketing, I think of hiring some type of marketing PR firm that reviews kind of our brand and then disseminates a different message that would be on the website, on the automobiles, and our pamphlets, and our mission that would marketing Leesburg.
Okay. That's it for me.
Commissioner Connell?
Nothing.
Mayor Burry?
Nothing tonight.
Motion to
Move for
adjourn.
Second that?
Yes.
Yes,
Second.
we do.
I didn't hear the motion.